Well, up next on CBC, as we've been mentioning, our whole show this morning has been dedicated to talking about the Arlington Bridge. We're now 1 week into the long-term closure of the bridge here in Winnipeg's North End, and neighbors and commuters are now having to look to McPhillips, Salter, or Main Street as the workarounds. My next two guests represent thousands of people who live in the wards that are mostly affected by the closure of the Arlington Bridge. To talk more about how it impacts residents and where the city steers the bridge debate next, I'm joined by Vivian Santos, the City Councillor for Point Douglas. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show today.
And just before I turn to Councillor Edie, you came in and said that was you talking about how sad it is to go by there, right?
Yes. I take that Logan Avenue to go into City Hall, and when I drive by it, it's the sad reality of seeing those barricades and fences up. It's very sad to see.
Councillor Ross Edie represents Minarski, also here with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. Thanks for having me on.
And your first words when I saw you this morning were decay, decay, decay. Can you elaborate?
Yes. Well, it's been going on since I was elected, and it sounds like historically forever. There's really no divide between the North End and the rest of the city. The only divide are the people who are making decisions don't represent the area, so they don't care, and because they have other political reasons. But the decay. Everything's decaying in the North End. We're doing investments in downtown, very important. I don't disagree. But look, we're not investing in the Dufferin neighborhood, which is the neighborhood right by adjacent on my side of the Arlington Bridge.
Yeah, it's the first street you hit.
Yeah, and then we have William White decay. So the big problem is, and I've said it's just constant. And I said to the former CFO, Mr. Mike Ruda, who was the CAO as well, I just said, this is not right. We're not taking care of our decay and moving forward. Let's take care of our decay and as well do growth. We can do both, but the problem is we get elected officials who make these flat promises about how much you can spend we're not making the need. So they do is what happens is the North End gets the wrong end of the stick. Right?
Now, you say that we can do both, but can we do both at this stage? I want to talk about how long Arlington has been, struggling. You were saying, Councillor Santos, that even the two of you, you knew this may be coming, but you didn't maybe know that it would be this fast. So what was it like for you when it's closed last week, deemed that we have to close it? What are you hearing from residents?
Well, residents are wondering where are they going to go now? Now most of this community walks and cycles and takes the bus. Now they have to walk 10 to 15 20 minutes to either to Salter or to McPhillips, or maybe they're not even going to walk anymore. They're just going to stay home, right, and not go out. And so that's in our current climate with mental health, we need to be outside. We need to be getting to our community centers. We need to be getting to our local grocery store, and those things are not going to be happening if they're going to be staying home or forced to stay home because now they can't cross Arlington Bridge. So those are important conversations that are happening, and as Councillor Edie had alluded to, we need those investments in our decay of our infrastructure. Are we going to be looking at what other alternatives and options are going to be made now for these communities who are directly affected? Are you now going to do more cycling infrastructure? Are you going to increase pedestrian access?
Could it be a moment could it be, just on that front before I turn back to Councillor Edie, could this be a moment, an opportunity for a vision, because we have arrived at the door, of Arlington having maybe no feasible future, who knows? But
well, I mean, the vision has always been to build the new Arlington Bridge. That has been the vision for the last couple of years, right? And both Councillor Edie and I had been advocating for a new bridge. Now that vision has come to a reality that maybe no bridge is being built, those are the conversations, us as leaders need to have with other stakeholders, because right now, it's really hard to see that vision when it's always been a new Arlington Bridge.
Yeah, fair enough. And of course, that conversation involves money and huge amounts of money, because then we're talking about rail yards. I want to ask you, Councillor Edie, two things. One is about the rail yards, but the first one is actually building on what some listeners said. Viv Ketchum wrote in, she said, will this affect the closure, the response time for emergency personnel? And Judy Hershkovich wrote in and said, a lot of people use that route, over over Arlington to get to the hospital. What's your sense of that, and is that a concern? What are you hearing from residents?
Absolutely, it is my concern, and as we heard from the history of the Arlington Bridge, it's never met the needs of the city for transit or for fire paramedic services, and it does have a really big effect. A lot of people actually who use Arlington go to work at the Health Sciences Center and all the different ancillary medical attention that you get there, and actually one of the things that they don't want to study, and I hear this, from the firefighters, well, to get a fire truck across, because sometimes you got to get fire trucks from either side to fight a big fire, and as well as getting the ambulances there and getting people promptly. So what I'm intending on doing, and you can call it political or whatever you want, what I'm saying is that bridge is there, let's make it more functional for transit, but I'm going to get a study because they're not willing to do it. I know somebody who has the expertise to do it. I'm going to hire them to see what is the delay in getting an ambulance over to the Health Sciences Center where the emergency is. Currently, Seven Oaks is still not an emergency room right now, and maybe in the future. But the point being is that it's the Health Sciences Center, so we need to get people there quickly. And every second, every minute counts when you have somebody in jeopardy like that.
Now, I know that Councillor Santos was just saying that right now the discussion has been, and the two of you have been advocating for a new bridge. However, let's talk about the rail yards for a moment here with the long history. This morning, they were saying that moving the rail yards, even that discussion's even been going on for decades and decades. There was money on the table in 1972 from the feds. There was like 50% of a funding agreement way back then that the city at the time turned down, I understand. Is it time to re-engage in that conversation? I mean, and look at the rail yards and moving them and contribute to the $400 million to that billion-dollar project, and instead of a new crossing. What are you hearing from residents, and is that maybe Councillor Santos first and then back to Councillor Eady?
Okay, I'm going to be quite frank on this issue. Removing the rail yards is going to take years and decades to have that conversation. You got to realize this is CP land that owns it. The provincial government and the federal government need to be at the table to have that discussion to move the rail lines and renegotiate all the lease agreements that are there with CP and all the ancillary and all the lines that go into that feed into Inkster Industrial and Omads Creek and even across. So just having those discussions is going to take a long time to renegotiate the lease. And then say you do get the rail lines, like hypothetically you get the rail lines out of there. What about the land that has that needs to be remediated? Who's going to spend the money to remediate the land? And even if you don't remediate the land, you're going to take about 50 to 75 years before you can even develop. So those conversations, I'm going to be quite honest, are not going to happen. I really do apologize to people who think that they're going to try to remove the rail lines. It's not going to happen.
Someone came in this morning. I was nodding when you were talking because someone came in for coffee, and they actually raised. They said they had a gas station in their neighborhood be demolished, and then getting that site back to green, back to safety. How long that took? So they were using that as their example. They said how could that be possible? How long would that?
And
even
that is
take?
True for this location. It's going to take decades to remediate that area.
So how do you dream big for the people of the north part of Winnipeg, Councillor Eady, when we have those realistic things pressing at us? Arlington closed for now, immediate concerns about access, rail yards being challenging, and maybe, as you're saying, Councillor Santos, maybe something we shouldn't be thinking about. What do you hope the future will be for the Arlington Bridge, and where do you think we should be thinking now?
We're going to hear from the consultant who's going to tell us in February that in order to make it last for another 25 years, it's going to cost $200 million. So the reality is, why spend $200 million for 25 years with a bridge that's not functional? If we spend $400 million, that's probably about the inflation on the bridge from when they did the Class 3 study. So I say we need to replace it. Now, on the rail yards, I just have to say, I grew up in the North End. I hung out in Transcona. There's so many. The railways have provided so many good-paying jobs. Mm-hmm. I know lots of people who had good-paying jobs. They had a proper pension put away. They're doing really well, and there's people out there making really good money. So don't tell me how bad the railway is. The railway has been providing jobs, and if you do move the yards, everybody thinks that they're just going to move outside of Winnipeg in Manitoba. No, this is CPR Kansas City Rail, the third biggest railway in North America. Where do you think they're going to move the jobs to? So,
other things to consider.
Yeah. So
that we haven't talked about.
And to pay for stuff in the future, you need people getting paid good money so they can afford to pay the property taxes and so on, so that we could have the infrastructure that we have in the city.
What's the number one thing that you're hearing from residents, Councillor Eadie?
From residents?
Yeah.
I got one call, the marginalization. Actually, the people you've already talked to him this morning, Mr. Jones, and there's several people. I get lots of emails. One woman who lives on Jefferson, who used to live in the Boyd Park area, talked about, look, the North End again is getting the short end of the stick because Boyd Park Community Center was just let go, and the city didn't invest the money that was required to keep that community center going. This woman remembers that. And
so people are feeling like there's a north-south divide that is deepened in some way by what's happening with Arlington.
But the divide isn't the railway. The divide is, well, I'm going to say our elected leaders better get with it, because you know what? It's the whole city we have to be concerned about.
So before we let you go this morning, and we could talk for hours about this, we appreciate your time. I want to leave with it's a fun anecdote. When you were little, you did something on Arlington Bridge that we don't recommend, but it's not dangerous because it's close, so nobody can go try this. What happened to you, Ross Eadie?
So I just learned to ride my two-wheeler when I was 6, but I was 7 years old the summer of 67, and this 12-year-old who was on a bigger bike, we went riding around, and we walked up the steep slope because I couldn't ride up, and then he said, I'm going to ride down, but you go first. So I went down towards Dufford Avenue, and I come flying down there. I was thinking, well, if I hit my brakes, I'm going to and I just went flying right through the Oh, man.
We're glad you're here to share that.
And it's not the reason why he's blind.
But you can see the risks I take.
Yeah.
Camaraderie between councillors who both represent the wards and constituencies that are right here in the North End and are both affected by the Arlington Bridge closure. Thank you both for being here. Obviously, we'll talk again as we see what happens through these months of closure and then where we go from here. Councillor Vivian Santos, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you here at Luda's.
Yes, good seeing you.
And Ross Eadie, thank you very much for being here as well.
You're welcome. Thanks, Marcia.